Hello, good people, and welcome to Hillbilly Cat History, signed, sealed, remembered, Elvis, Charlie, California. Hello, Gun. Thank you for coming. I appreciate seeing you here. And today, we're still filming Speedway, and we're back on the track. And we're gonna get back on that track through the crucible of a warrior. And I'll talk to you guys on the other side.
Born in the fire, Evansville flame, hammering Hank called down his name. 16 and airborne boots in the dirt, jumping through walls, so baptized and hurt. Karate in Japan, fists like steel, champion of honor, deadly and real. Sensei, a warrior's no room for doubt. You wear the G or you train and come back. Your eyes a crucible, baby, not a showbiz belt. You bleed, you break, you feel a warrior's spell. Elvis hit the mat, but he rolls with a roll. Sneer in his soul, ready for war. It's burning, burning, burning through the pain. Crucible of a warrior, forging Hank's domain. 30 throws, not dances a fight. Bones to set, boards shattered on sight. Shoot oh elbow, fingertip flame. Every strike a prayer, every K a name. 6 weeks of fire, no cameras, no fame. Just sweat and bruises, no one played tame. Saw came in, fist like a stone, said put him down, break ribs if it's known. It's a crucible, baby, not a velvet crown. You fall, you crawl, but you don't stay down. Elvis hit the mat, but he rose with the roll. Sneer in his soul, ready for war. It's burning, burning, burning through the pain. Crucible of a warrior, forged in Hank's domain. All eyes watched the king that day. Would he crumble or would he stay? But Hank saw it, war in his eyes. Not a quitter, but a fighter who rise. From Hollywood lights to dojo dust, Elvis earned it not on fame but trust. No stunt, no script, just grit and bruise. Black belt truth, not a headline rule. It's a crucible, baby, not a stage or set. You earn every inch, every beat of sweat. Elvis hit the mat, but he rolls with a roar. Sneer in his soul, ready for war. It's burning, burning, burning through the pain. Crucible of a warrior. They burned through the fire, broke through the fear. In the dojo, legends and kings stood clear. Crucible of a warrior. Elvis was here.
Thank you all for gathering here at Hillbilly Cat History, where we remember together and listen for the echoes. And today, we're going to hear echoes from Charlie, from California, from some unexpected people. And we're going to start, for those of you who are here at the beginning of the broadcast, or who watch from the very beginning of the replay, this is where it all pays off. Because I'm about to show you an Elvis artifact that you've never seen. I guarantee nobody has seen this artifact. And it's going to demonstrate what it meant to know Elvis Presley professionally. That when Elvis had worked with you, it wasn't just the money that you made while you worked with Elvis, or maybe from the one song that you wrote for him, or for the one movie that you were in with him. It follows you for your entire life, and in some cases, significantly adds to your career. This is an ad from a 1967 Elvis fan magazine. And I'm sure this ad ran in other places. And it says, for sale, the Jordanaires sweater. Fur blend cardigans, silk lined, embroidered by hand. 70% lamb's wool, 20% Angora, and 10% nylon. Sizes 36 to 44. Colors pink, blue, beige, black, and white. Usual price $25. For Elvis fans, $15 international money order. From the Jordanaires' own ladies' dress/sweater shop in Nashville. And you can address your international money order straight to them in Nashville on Benton Smith Road, or you can write direct to the Jordanaires. Or they say, please don't write direct to the Jordanaires, as we cannot reply to queries regarding the sweaters. So they're asking that all those inquiries go through their shop, the Jordanaire sweaters. Now, how many of you knew that one of the backup groups for Elvis had their own ladies' dress and sweater shop in Nashville, Tennessee, where they did most of their recording? They were based out of Nashville. Now, I'm not sure where it is in the lineup, but if you're following the post that I put out every day, I'm linking you to source material, which is mostly interviews with people who knew Elvis. And in one of them, a Jordanaire is going to show up. And he'll tell you that the reason the Jordanaires became so successful is because they knew Elvis, and suddenly everyone knew their name, and they wanted them to be their backup singers. That before Elvis, nobody used backup singers. But after Elvis, everybody wanted them, and because Jordanaires had been Elvis's backup singers, everybody wanted them to be their backup singer. Well, in a similar way, people who were into Elvis wanted to wear clothes like his backup singers, the Jordanaires. And they're able to sell these sweaters. Now let's look at this price for a minute. This particular fan magazine is printed in England. So these people will be sending $15 American money to America, but from England. So I find that interesting as well, because I don't know if that covers all of the shipping or how that all works, but $15 in 1967 was about $145 today in 2025. So these sound like cheap sweaters at first, but if you had lived back then and wanted to purchase one, even with the Elvis discount, because you're an Elvis fan, it feels like $145. That feels like a lot of money to me for a sweater. Now, maybe I'm just really cheap. So you ladies tell me, $145 to look like a Jordanaire, is that too much, too little? What do you think? Put it in the comments, put it in the chat. Marion says that she did not know that the Jordanaires sold sweaters, but she would have loved to have one, that she loves the Jordanaires. Well, there's got to be some still out there. I haven't tracked any down yet. I never even knew they existed until I ran across this ad very recently. But there you can see that it may be out there in a variety of colors. If you look hard enough, somebody might still have one in their closet. That ad ran in an April fanzine, and the next month Elvis got married. And I think this is a slightly different picture than any that we've seen of the wedding. And you can see a guy on a violin just off to the right-hand side. But Elvis has a particularly happy look. He's looking at somebody just off screen or just outside of the picture. And Priscilla, she has a huge smile on her face that seems very, very real. She's living in the moment, and she's guiding Elvis's hand to cut the cake, and she finds something about it either enjoyable or amusing. And Marion says, that is a high price for the sweater. I wonder if they sold many. Well, I'm wondering at the $25 price point, maybe not. I'm wondering, do they still sell sweaters? You know, I believe that the group's name remains alive, and there's still a group, the Jordanaires. It's a business thing. You know, these gospel singers, they figured out how to copyright or trademark or whatever it is they do with the names, and they are very good at turning their intellectual property into revenue. That's why J.D. Sumner was very successful. He understood the business aspect. But I didn't know the business aspect extended to sweaters, and now I'm wondering if J.D. Sumner's group, the Stamps, had sweaters. I don't think they were known for wearing sweaters, but isn't that interesting? Hi, Anna. Thank you so much for coming. Appreciate seeing you here. And Gunn says that if she could find one, it would be pink. She would want the pink sweater. Now, here's a guitar that's got a story with it. This is the Gibson Sunburst acoustic guitar. And it's in Elvis's house in Palm Springs. So I'm not sure when it enters the picture. Could have been like 1966, because I believe that's when he leases a house in Palm Springs. Could have been later. But I think it comes into the picture sometime in 1967. It's either at the house where they had the honeymoon, and then it would go to the next house, or it originates in the next house. They're not even sure when they describe this guitar what year it was made, which for a Gibson seems like it would be easy to track that down if you had this Gibson in front of you in the details. I'm not an expert in guitars, but I know that there's things about Gibsons that tell you when they're made. But they're saying it's from the 1960s. So I think this guitar has either been in Elvis's hand already for 1967 that we've been talking about, or it will be soon. And what Charlie Hodge says is this Gibson Sunburst acoustic guitar as owned and played by Elvis Presley. Elvis had various guitars at his homes in California and Memphis, and this particular one came out of his home in Palm Springs. So this is a guitar that Charlie Hodge has played. Supposedly it's the same guitar, or they imply, they never say, but they put this picture with it, or a copy of this picture, so they imply that this guitar in this photo is the same guitar, which would mean Elvis probably had it for longer, so it probably is in Palm Springs right now. Now, if you keep watching those posts, there'll come one with Charlie Hodge at some point. There'll be several, but there's going to be one with Charlie Hodge, and he'll explain that he owned 3 guitars from Elvis, and he kept one in each place that they would normally go to. So one was in Memphis, one was in Palm Springs, and one was in Los Angeles. And that way he didn't have to be concerned that he would damage these rather expensive guitars that Elvis had gifted to him. So Charlie was intimate with all of the instruments that Elvis had at each of these houses because he and Elvis would play together. So Charlie, he had his hands on all of these instruments. Now, it's not clear to me whether Charlie ever owned this particular guitar or if he simply verified the guitar. But here we can see another picture of it in its case. Now, this is Susanna Lee, and she was Elvis's co-star in Paradise Hawaiian Style. She is from England, and she came. This part wasn't clear to me. She either left America and went back to England, or she came from England, where she'd been for a little while, came back to America. And when she reached one of those points, the reporters got a hold of her, and they asked her about Elvis's wedding, which shows you how big of news Elvis's wedding was. They were asking anybody they could find that had any connection to Elvis about his wedding to Priscilla. So this is what she said, and it must have been sometime in May of 1967. Susanna says, "A man so charming is entitled to happiness outside his work, and he deserves his privacy. He has been living in something like a goldfish bowl for years and years. We talked about marriage, and there was no doubt in my mind that Elvis would, one day, make a wonderful and attentive husband. Equally, there was no doubt that he would not rush into marriage just for the sake of it." So Susanna seems to be saying that if there are implications that Elvis was coerced into marriage, that she does not believe them. That she believes Elvis would only marry because he wished to, and that he wouldn't do it for form or because anybody else thought it was the right thing to do. It would have to be what Elvis chose to do. Hi, Pat. Thank you so much for coming. Appreciate seeing you here. And this is something that Susanna said in 1967. Now, 20 years later, she's on talk shows, and she says very similar things about Elvis. She truly loved Elvis as a friend. She explains that it was her choice that they not have any kind of relationship, any romantic relationship, but that she truly admired Elvis and respected him as a friend. And throughout her life, she stands up for and defends Elvis anytime she's in the public eye, and because Elvis invariably comes up. Just like for the Jordanaires, Elvis is now linked to her for the rest of her life. And so he comes up whenever she's in the public view. And whenever things are said that she finds derogatory about him in a very classy way. That reminds me a lot of Donna Presley right now. She comes out and she speaks out against it. And this is what she said as far back as 1967. Now, Anne Margaret, in 1967, while she was still engaged to Roger Smith, so this was before she got married, which was a week after Elvis did. And so this must have been right around the time that Elvis was about to get married. So I think this quote must be from around April of 1967, maybe March. It's somewhere in the time period, but I think it's before Elvis got married and before she is. Anne says so many people were trying to get Elvis married off that it just became plain ridiculous. So happens that he and I shared a lot of things in common, especially a love of fast motorcycling. I read a lot of the stories about us, and I couldn't help but laughing. But Elvis was more sensitive about this sort of intrusion of his privacy. And anyway, I'm sure he already has a girl who means a great deal to him. She's not an actress or a singer. And wild horses wouldn't drag any more about it from me. I think Anne Margaret tells us a lot here that she may not realize that she's revealing. She says so many people were trying to get Elvis married off that it just became plain ridiculous. So I think she's referencing back to when she was dating Elvis, and the rumors in the magazines kept linking them to marriage. Because this is part of what drives her and Elvis apart, is the press and their statements that he and Anne Margaret are going to be married. And then Anne says, he and I shared a lot of things in common. The guys have often said that they thought Anne Margaret and Elvis shared a lot of things in common. And she's echoing that, or they're echoing her, and she's saying we did. We had a lot of things in common. Hi, Luann. Thank you so much for coming. Appreciate seeing you here. And then she says that they especially loved fast motorcycling, which is a confirmation of other stories that we've seen about Anne Margaret and Elvis. The guys, they mention how much they like to motorcycle. She says, I read a lot of the stories about us, and I couldn't help but laughing. So Anne indicates that the press stories that said that she and Elvis were married or going to be married, she laughed at those, that they did not affect her. She did not find them to be serious, that they didn't affect her ego one way or the other. They're just something that shows up in the press. And then she says, but Elvis was more sensitive about this sort of intrusion of his privacy. So Anne indicates that press is not important to her, but it was important to Elvis. And I think that what actually happened between them is Anne made some unfortunate remarks to the press. Either they weren't very savvy, or they were her real feelings, or Elvis felt she'd revealed too much, and that things have been said to the press and into the public that shouldn't have been. And we'd have to go through that whole story in a lot more detail to drag out exactly what it was, but Anne Margaret is summarizing it here as kind of that she didn't find that saying anything to the press mattered one way or the other because she laughs at the press. It's not important to her. But she finds out that it's very important to Elvis. And that there's an intrusion of his privacy. Now, an intrusion of his privacy indicates that truth was told to the press, because if they had printed fake news, something that hadn't struck at Elvis's heart because it wasn't in some way true, then it wouldn't have been an intrusion of his privacy, and he would have probably laughed it off too. Hi, Terry. Thank you so much for coming. I appreciate seeing you here. And Marion says that many say that Anne Margaret and Elvis were soulmates. And Pat says that they've had a whiteout, a snow blizzard where she's at, and that her car lost control. I hope everybody's okay, Pat. And that her granddaughters had an adventure to tell mom and dad. And Luann says that you can love a friend without thoughts in your mind, surely. That's a good point, Luann. But it appears to me that Anne Margaret is addressing a moment when things got put into the press. Elvis took it badly. And then she says, and anyway, which is a dismissive phrase. She's dismissing the romance that may have been between her and Elvis by saying, I'm sure he already has a girl who means a great deal to him. She seems to be revealing that she either knew about Priscilla at the time or she's aware of her now. And this is before Priscilla is common knowledge. Although Anne knows about her and other people do. People in the press have already told us they know about her. But Anne says she's not an actress or a singer. So again, this is a reference to Priscilla. I think it's also a reference that Anne is an actress and a singer, and therefore she's not qualified to be married to Elvis because his qualifications require that you are not a singer or an actress. And then she says, and wild horses wouldn't drag any more about it from me. So she indicates that she has more knowledge, but she's not going to tell us. But she has hinted at some other things. And in this one statement, I think you can see why Elvis might have felt discomfort with Anne Margaret's judgment about what should and should not be said to the press. She's obviously hinted at things, but then says, well, I'm not going to say anymore. Well, once you say that, they're going to continue to hound you about this, which is a good way to keep the press after you, but it's by using Elvis to do that. And I don't think that this is an isolated incident on her part. I think this is how she handles the press. And that Elvis didn't care for that. Now, is that enough reason to break up with somebody and not to marry? I don't know. I'm not sure that that is the whole reason one way or the other. But Anne Margaret seems to be addressing it in this quote. And we know that a week after Elvis got married, so did she. And she was already engaged while she's saying that I'm sure Elvis has another girl. As if the window might be open that they might get back together. And yet they're both already committed to other people. Now, Priscilla Presley says, after she was married, shortly afterwards, now that I am married to a star, I realize more than ever that it is important that private and public lives be kept apart. It's almost as if she's speaking directly to Anne Margaret. That Anne has revealed too much of her private life into the press. And Priscilla's saying that's not going to be happening with me. I'm going to keep my mouth shut about Elvis. And she started off on May 1st at the press conference by not answering any questions and letting Elvis handle all the talking. And this is some kind of press conference she did shortly after that. Somebody came and interviewed her. And she says, I got to keep the private and the public lives apart. And here we can see Charlie. Got me slightly out of order, but to show this with the guitar, but just a reminder of Charlie and Elvis and how close they were. Now, on July 7th, it's hard to read this because it's a legal size sheet and it's showing up on the screen kind of tiny. But this is a call sheet from Speedway. This is a glimpse behind the scenes on how do they make sure that everybody's there and that they're getting all the shots done and they know who's supposed to be on set, who's supposed to be in makeup and all that kind of, well, they got this call sheet. And this tells you when you've got to be on set, when you've got to show up to prepare and when you're going to be getting filmed. And this is for July 7th, 1967, for the movie Speedway. And Gunn says, did Priscilla write anything about Anne Margaret in any of her books? I don't know if she talked about Anne Margaret by name or not. I'd have to go back and research that. Nothing pops to mind. She made a lot of generic comments about co-stars and women in Hollywood. I think that Priscilla, I don't think she makes it a habit to mention other women's names. Some people find that there's power in names, and there certainly is if you state them in a public broadcast that's seen by a lot of people. So I think Priscilla tends to talk about anybody else that was with Elvis under a generic lump of other women. And on this sheet, we can see that most people have to report about 7 a.m., I think. Or 8 a.m., so it's a fairly early call. Now, when I saw this picture, this occurs during Speedway. And Elvis is participating in a charity drive for the Easter Seals, which is a charitable organization that's going to collect money and disperse it in charitable ways. And this paper that they're holding between them, it's the seals themselves, which are like stamps or stickers. And then you can put them on things and people know that you donated to the Easter Seals, and it promotes the Easter Seals to whoever you've given it to. It's kind of like, it's actually a very ingenious marketing scheme to keep the name alive and keep it moving and people thinking about it and donating. So Elvis was part of this. He wanted to raise money for this charity. And I thought this was Burt Lancaster. I kept looking at this saying, this is Burt Lancaster. And I kept trying to research Burt Lancaster and Elvis and these Easter Seals, and nothing comes up. And the reason it doesn't come up is it's not Burt Lancaster. Do any of the rest of you think it looks like Burt Lancaster, or is that just me? This is Dale Robertson, who is a famous actor, but not one that I'm actually familiar with. This is a period of TV that, if it didn't show in syndication during the 1980s or late 70s, it really had to be the 80s, then I don't know about it. And I don't think any of his shows were in syndication when I was a kid in my area. But he is a famous actor. And his name's Dale Robertson. And he's come together with Elvis to help raise money for people who need it. For charity. And Pat says kinda he does look like Burt Lancaster. I think maybe he's a little shorter than Burt, but his smile just throws me in this picture. But let's take another look at him. And when he turns, he looks like Burt again. He's got Burt's hair. That's why I think he looks like Burt Lancaster. But this is Dale Robertson. And Gunn says he has a Burt Lancaster smile. Right. And Terry says he thought he was Tony Curtis. Ah, come on, Terry. Well, maybe. He does have Tony Curtis's later hair. The hairstyle that Tony Curtis wore in later life. And the man between them, I have not identified him. So if you know who that is, let me know. But again, Dale, I would have said, oh, that's Burt Lancaster. Even full face on into the camera. And Elvis has a particularly winning smile in this picture. He's apparently tickled by something. And there we can see them again. Dale Robertson, Elvis Presley, raising money for charity together. Giving their time for a good cause. They're on the set of Speedway. And Victoria Paige Meyerink, who was the little girl that we met yesterday, that's in this movie with Elvis. She says that Elvis seemed to prefer hanging out with me on the set, and lunching together is flattering. I got the impression he really enjoyed being a big kid, making my little books with me, playing cards between scenes and rehearsals, and feeding the tiny kitten in my trailer. I had sneaked Kitty onto the set in a shoebox. Anyone could tell he'd be a terrific father. He exuded such warmth and joy. Nancy Sinatra says, I treasure Elvis. You will never know how much I miss him. Here we can see Elvis driving the stock car in the race. Now, I believe he's on set with a projection, a rear screen. But it sure looks like he's racing in Charlotte on the motor speedway. And Victoria Paige, she says, Elvis talked me into actually eating the prop hot dogs with him in the hangout scene. So apparently Elvis talked this little girl into helping him play a prank on the prop guys, because now they're going to have to get him more hot dogs. And Luann says that she thought Dale was Burt Lancaster too. And here's Elvis and Nancy Sinatra in the movie. You can see the go-go boots that Nancy was famous for at this time. These boots were made for walking. Now on August 18th, 1967, principal photography for Speedway is completed. It's not quite the end of the movie, but it's the end of the filming. And 10 years from this day, from the exact day that they end this filming, That will be Elvis's funeral. 10 years from this day. And this is just another page from the script. This one's from back in June, on June 6th. So that they were still making some changes, even as they were going into filming, getting ready to, because they started about 2 weeks later, 3 weeks later. We went saying that if you just take a quick look at Dale, that he does look like Burt Lancaster. Exactly. He's got a strong resemblance, at least in my mind. Now, this is a picture of the cast party. This was the end of the filming. And pretty much all these people broke up and they didn't see each other anymore, except for Elvis. And you can see Richard Davis right behind Nancy. And you can see Marty Lacker. And you can see Jerry Schilling. If you look all the way to the left, you can see Joe Esposito in the back. You might notice some other faces in here as well. I'm not recognizing anyone else immediately. And Gunn says that she heard Nancy say that Elvis rang her on the night Lisa Marie was born, and he was so happy, but he worried over the other children who were born the same night not having it as good as Lisa Marie. She did say that. And Marion says that absolutely sounds like Elvis. And that is exactly as Nancy described it. And Pat says that Elvis was always thinking about other people. But what I think is really significant about this picture, other than it's the wrap-up of this show, the Speedway, is it's exactly 10 years out. And 10 years before had been 1957, which was probably the greatest year of perhaps his entire career. Now, he didn't make as much money in 1957 as he would later, but he accomplished so many things. It was certainly the height of his early career. On August 21st, 1967, Elvis completes the audio looping for Speedway in the morning. So this is a few days later, after this party. And then after lunch, he has makeup tests for his next picture, Stay Away Joe. So he finishes working on one movie in the morning, and in the afternoon, he begins working on the next movie. And on August 22nd, 1967, Elvis was released from Speedway. They said that he didn't have anything else to do. That was the end of the contract. All Elvis had to do now was sit back and collect his 50% of the royalties after they released the movie. So Elvis is scheduled to go to 2 nights of recording at RCA Studio A on Sunset Boulevard. But there's an accident. And we're not going to talk about the accident in this episode. Probably talk about it in the next one. But it involves Richard Davis. And it's pretty terrible. But because of this, they cancel all of their plans in Los Angeles and they immediately leave and go to Vegas. So Elvis and Priscilla go to Las Vegas. There's a fear of bad publicity about what happened, and they kind of run from the press. So be sure to tune in for the next episode so that you can learn more about that. But then, on August 26, 1967, Elvis returns to Memphis, and he and Priscilla arrive home, according to the information I've got, kind of unverified, but it's at 8:20 a.m. in the morning. So they must have left pretty early in the morning over in California. Like maybe around midnight or 2 o'clock in the morning, something like that. And they've arrived at 8:20 a.m. on August 26, 1967. Hi, Jen. Thank you so much for coming. Appreciate seeing you here. And then on the 27th, so the day after they get back, Elvis is at the Circle G Ranch. But they're moving away from the horseback riding, according to this information, and he's doing more target shooting. Now, I don't know how true that is. It sounds to me like he just got back. He's probably doing everything that's on the ranch, like all at once. You know how excited Elvis can get about things. So, in my imagination, which is purely imagination and speculation, he spends some time at Graceland because he loves to come home to Graceland. And he gets his fill of a couple of good meals. And the next day, he's up bright and early and he heads over to the ranch and he starts riding. Then they start target shooting with some of his guns. Maybe he's collected some while he's back in California. I'm not sure. They're probably doing some kind of cookouts or something. It doesn't specifically mention that, but Elvis probably spent some time in the trailer, you know, just getting used to being back home. And I'm not sure that target shooting is a new hobby. I think this is something he's been doing for several years now. Now, Speedway itself, it's going to premiere in Charlotte on June 12th, 1968, in Charlotte, North Carolina. And it's going to end up placing number 40 for the year for 1968 in the Variety Weekly National Box Office list, which makes it a box office success. It makes money. It doesn't make as much money as The Graduate, which will be the number one grossing movie for 1967, but it had the same budget. These two films were roughly the same budget. But it's going to do well. It's going to return money for the investors. And this will be the last film that will be this musical. There will be less music in the next few movies. Now, if you got to go to that world premiere, Charlotte, North Carolina, you would have had to have a souvenir ticket, just like this one. So that you could have seen the premiere of Elvis Presley and Nancy Sinatra in Speedway with Bill Bixby. And this says Elvis Presley and Nancy Sinatra turning on the romance as they make the racing scene at the famed, furious Charlotte 600. And now Elvis is back on the ranch. He's been able to return to the Circle G. He's going to be there for a little while. But then he's going to end up going back to California in order to film Stay Away Joe. And they'll go on to location. And those things will happen like later in September. Actually, in October is when he's going to go back to film Stay Away Joe. So I feel like he's on the ranch, and I'm trying to verify all this, that he's on the ranch for the rest of, what little bit is left of August. Basically the end of the month. And then he's on the ranch for most of September. And then he reports back for the other movie in October, although they've already got the makeup test done, so he's one step in. And Marty Lacker is on the ranch right now. Apparently, at some point, he determined he didn't want to stay in the hotel anymore. And so Marty returned to Memphis, and he's been working on the ranch. And we're going to hear about that in the next episode. Jerry Schilling is gone. We know that he left. He left at the end of Speedway. He stayed in California. So he has not returned. We don't really know where Red West is. We don't really know where Sonny West is. It appears they're both working in California on movies and in television. But I don't think they're here at the ranch either. We're not sure where Lamar is. We know he was at the ranch on May 4th or 5th. But we don't know if he went to film Speedway or not. We don't know if he's come back. We're assuming Alan Fortas is still at the ranch. And we know that Larry Geller, he left before the marriage on May 1st. So he left the last day of April. So things are changing rapidly for Elvis now that he's married. And this is basically going to be his last month on the Circle G. And that's really what we're going to talk about tomorrow. Well, we're going to talk about what happened with Richard Davis. And then we'll get into the Circle G. And then eventually we're going to get back to Stay Away Joe as we continue our walk through 1967. And that's where I'm going to leave it for today. And I'm going to leave it with a song like I always do. And I just want to thank all of you for being here with me as we walk through and tell all these stories. And we line up, when did everything happen in 1967? And how did it happen? And I'm beginning to feel this was a very, very important year for Elvis. Maybe more important than any biography has ever given it credit for. So thank you all for being here with me. And I'm going to play He Gave Away His Heart. And until I see you all again, y'all keep on taking care of business.
Midnight lights, rhinestone fire, Arabian suit, burning with desire. He hit the stage like thunder rolls. Vegas shook and the story unfold. Charlie's birthday, crowd went wild. He cracked a joke, then sang with style. But just before he sang Hurt So Deep, He stopped the show and made us weep. He gave away his heart, not just a song, diamonds and gold, where the love belong. Rings and shades from the man backstage. He healed the broken, he lit the flame. Oh, he gave away his heart, and I saw it all that night. Black in hair, the man stepped near. Elvis smiled, the crowd could hear. Thanks to you, we raised the light. 17,000 hearts took flight. Then back behind the velvet door, he gave away a little more. Music ring, a boxcar shine, a suit that held his sacred time. He gave away his heart, not just a song, diamonds and gold, where the love belongs. Rings and shades from the man backstage. He healed the broken, he lit the flame. Oh, he gave away his heart, and I saw it all that night. He didn't need applause to know his worth. He gave away his soul in Vegas mirth. Not just a king, but something more. A man who knew what hearts were for. Gave away his heart, not just a soul. Pieces of love where the brave belong. Ritual gifts from the man backstage. He saved the hurting, hid the flame. Oh, he gave away his heart, then I'll never be the same. I was there, I saw the rings, I saw the light. Gave away his heart, and it burned.